Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Beatrice, and I'm part of the Global Wellness Institute team. We also have Susie Ellis and Nancy Davis on. They both head up our organization. The call today is a Global Wellness Institute Initiative collaboration call and hosted by the Wellness at Work initiative. They will host a series of 3 calls in total, and we'll experience part 1 today. The topic is Leading in the Next Normal, Setting the Agenda to Thrive, a conversation about leadership with VPs at the Coca-Cola Company and Barilla. I'm delighted to introduce Renee Moorefield to you. She's the moderator and organizer of the call and also the chair of the Wellness at Work initiative and an expert in this field. Thank you so much, Renee, for organizing the call today, and over to you. Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Beatrice, and thanks everyone for showing up for this call. We were so excited as a Wellness at Work initiative team to offer this series, especially now. The world has been so upended, and with the global pandemic, with civil unrest, there's so much going on that we thought, what a great opportunity to provide a series that we can talk about and learn from other companies, talking about leadership, talking about in our second session in July, diversity, inclusion, and gender. And in our third session in August, talk about the new reasons why to prioritize wellness at work. So thank you guys for showing up. I've got the fun job of talking with our guest, and then I've got the unenviable job of managing our time. So I'm going to talk about a few logistical things before we get started and before I introduce our guest. So a couple of logistics. If you want to see the incredible array of people that are part of this call, if you go up to the right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a couple of views that you can choose. One is the gallery view. That gallery view will show you all the faces and names of people. We have people from 68 countries around the world, so it's pretty exciting to see the array of people that are interested in this subject and know that we are all part of this community interested in well-being at work and leading in a way that supports people in thriving. So use that. You might want to use the speaker view when someone's talking, just so you can really be present with that speaker. So that's the first thing. Also use chat. Feel free to use chat at the lower part of your screen. You'll see the chat button. All through this session, feel free to put comments, put questions that you have throughout the entire session. Our agenda is, I'm going to be asking our guests a couple of questions around leading within this pandemic and what they're learning regarding well-being of people and well-being at work, and how they are moving forward with those insights to create healthier, more sustainable future for their company and for societies and the world. Hopefully we'll do that within 35 and 40 minutes, and then we'll leave about 15 minutes for some Q&A. When we get to that Q&A portion, as you notice, you're all muted, but when we get to that Q&A portion, John Toomey, who is the co-chair of the Wellness at Work initiative, a vice chair, helping to lead the initiative with me, will pick the questions from people. If your question is picked, please unmute yourself, say your name, say where you're from, and ask your question. And then we'll roll like that for about 10 to 15 minutes. If we do not get to all the questions, please don't be concerned. We're capturing all of this, and after the event, we will try to get back with you to answer your questions. And then the last thing would be, let's see here. I think I covered everything. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna now move into the more fun part of the agenda. And before I introduce our guests, I want everyone to just take a big stretch, do whatever you need to. Maybe it's a fake yawn. If you don't have a yawn in there, just fake it till you make it. Or take one arm, place it overhead, and breathe to one side, then breathe to the other. Or maybe put your hands behind your back and stretch your chest forward a bit. Or stretch your neck side to side. Do whatever you need to do, any kind of micro adjustments you need to make. to really support yourself in being right here with this call. Because we're going to meet some incredible people. We really want this session and the subsequent sessions to be an opportunity to learn from how companies, how employers are thinking about well-being and work, maybe in new ways because of what we've been learning through the pandemic. So let me introduce our guest. I'll read you a little bio of them. Dondeena Bradley is our first guest. She's the Global VP of Nutrition and Wellbeing at the Barilla Group, an Italian food company with a global reach. So Dondeena, if you can wave to everybody. Awesome, awesome, so we can see you. She spent thousands of hours challenging teams to deliver breakthroughs in health and wellness innovation with consistent success in diverse cultures at a number of Fortune 500 companies, such as Weight Watchers, PepsiCo, Mars. She's also the author of Living Full Circle, a book which translates time-tested and proven healing remedies into practical ways for taking care of ourselves. And Dondeena, when I saw that, I thought, okay, this is the book I think I need right now, so I got to get a copy of that. And I am just super grateful that you're a part of this conversation today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then our second guest is Joan Prats. Joan and I go way back, probably now, 27-ish years. We've known each other for a long time. He's the VP of Corporate Affairs at the Coca-Cola Company and is an entrepreneurial and international leader with experience in operations, marketing, customer relationships, and communication. He's been at TCC, or Coca-Cola Company, for many, many decades, mostly in Latin America and Europe, and today is based in Mexico. Joan, I am so appreciative that you are part of this conversation. So if you could wave to everyone, we could hear your voice. And you may be muted.
Thank you, Renee. Good morning.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
So to both of you, I'm just grateful that you're part of this conversation. What I'd like to do is I'm going to start with a question for both of you. And it's more of an overarching question. And then we're going to dive directly into COVID-19 and how you've been dealing with COVID-19. Then I want to ask you a question about your personal well-being and what's showing up in your own leadership. What are you learning in your own life and in the way you lead? How this pandemic has really affected you. And then we'll take some questions from the audience and then close. So that's our agenda. So the first question, given all of the upending that we're all feeling, and we're feeling it not just in our personal lives, we're feeling it in our teams. The way we work has had to be different. The way our organizations have run has had to be different on every level. The last 6 months has been, there's been some dramatic changes. In what ways has the well-being of your workforce, whether that's employees, contractors, or your larger ecosystem, whether that's distributors, suppliers, manufacturers, how have people been impacted negatively or positively by the pandemic that we've been a part of in this period of time? And I wonder if, Joan, you want to get us started?
Sure. Thank you, Renee. Again, happy to be here with all of you. Let me give you just a little background about Coca-Cola in Mexico. We operate a large organization with over 100,000 people to cover off a country with 125 million inhabitants. And we service around 1.5 million customers on a weekly basis. So that is a large organization that obviously has been impacted by the COVID-19. And the first thing we did, obviously, is not only following the government's advice and the guidelines, but importantly to protect, number one priority, the health and well-being of our people. Now, granted that we have different positions within the organization, and those, let me call it those positions, the immediate action was taken to operate from home. But then there's obviously another part of the organization that is in the factories, in the bottling operations, in distributions and sales and value chain operations that had to obviously operate the business in order to keep on delivering the products to our customers. Of course, in between of this, part of the guidelines from the government is whether our business it is or it is not considered to be an essential business for the within the COVID-19 pandemic, which from the meaning of our industry in terms of providing, hydration to people has been determined that it was important for our business, like any other, not every business, but the food and drink businesses, actually to ensure that the operation could continue. So yes, we have been impacted because, of course, as you can imagine, once you get some level of lockdown within the country, the operations get distorted. If a shop gets closed, if a city gets locked down, obviously the model that we have to ensure that on a daily basis, we can deliver to those small, medium, and large shops our products. Of course, if demand goes down, obviously we need to reinstall basically the planning process. Now, importantly, once we were faced with the pandemic, and I'm talking now in our case, mid-February, the first thing, as I mentioned, was to protect the health and well-being of those frontliners, what we call our heroes. Those that, in fact, are into the daily operations, going out, and of course, with very stringent preventive measures for them to ensure that, of course, the safety for them was first. So whether in that case, ensuring, the hygiene of washing hands, wearing a mask, gloves, and antibacterial gel to clean their utilities and whatever tools they needed to operate. But also ensuring that besides the protection of our workforce, Renee, we ensured that that level of preventive measures, as well as tools that could help actually prevent from the spreading of the pandemic, were actually focused also on our customers. In other words, our system that, as I was mentioning, reaches out to tens of thousands of customers on a daily basis, with trucks operating 24/7. We use those infrastructure and the operation to ensure that we could actually bring to those customers, again, protective measures for them to be protecting themselves from their own customers. So in other words, we created a chain reaction from our employees to customers to the value chain to ensure that we were able to actually spread, again, not only messages, but ensuring that they had the right tools to protect themselves. And in the case of a little shop in Mexico, we operate around 1 million little mom and pop, we call it the traditional channel shops, to ensure that they were equipped, for instance, with tools that actually prevented them to be too close to their own customers. In other words, to create that social distancing from within the store, with tools that actually we deliver to them, to protect their own safety and, of course, the safety of their customers coming in, so that we could actually be part of that chain reaction of messaging, protection measures, spreading it throughout our barrio chain.
Joan, I'm wondering, what has been the level of receptivity to your efforts? Because it sounds like what you were doing was not just focused on your employees, but you were looking at the whole value chain and starting to, go down and say, okay, what protective measures need to happen all through it? What's been the level of receptivity to that?
It has been great. In fact, one of the things that we decided, Renee, is that what we were facing is far bigger than a company like ours. I mean, we're a large organization, but one of the things that we did, and that's part of the mindset change, is that we gathered together with the rest of the industry, and we said, listen, we need to be in this together. So we cannot do this alone. And if we connect, we do not compete on this. I think we can go faster and reach out to even more numbers of customers in a quicker fashion, if you wish. So in that model, we created, for instance, a small group to create an agility kind of decision making. And you'll be glad to hear that, with our kind of fierce PepsiCo, we align, in the middle one, but also together on the list with Mars, with Bimbo, together to create this kind of effort to push these measures forward very quickly. So well received by the trade, tremendous empathy with those within the food and drink beverage industry that we compete with to ensure that we can actually elevate our thinking well beyond our day-to-day kind of competition kind of debates.
I mean, that's good to hear. And what have been the impacts? Do you have any sense of um, the effects so far? As far as prevention, some of the prevention.
Yes, I mean, the numbers are, if we compare, those stores that actually implemented the preventive messages before others, I can tell you that there is a difference. I mean, as you can see, sadly, I mean, Mexico is running very high now on rates of infection and spreading the disease. And I can tell you those that actually accommodated and understood that it was important because, this is, as you know, it's a disease that you don't see, that you believe that maybe it's not going to happen to you. So again, it's not an automatic kind of realization, if you wish, that those preventive messages that you never had to have before, were going to be good for you in the mid long run. So yes, to your question, yes, we have seen differences definitely in those that adopted early on, those that unfortunately, it took a bit longer for them to actually accept.
Okay. So, Dondeena, I want to bring your voice into this conversation. I'm wondering, same question for Barilla. How did you all approach, what have you been in regards to the well-being of employees or the well-being of the value chain? What's been your approach? How have you been thinking about that given the pandemic? And what have you all been doing?
Yeah, well, thank you, Renee, for including me. And I thought maybe we just, for those of you who are not familiar with Barilla, it's an Italian family-owned company, pasta makers and bakers with a presence in over 100 countries, 8,000 employees. And from my perspective, the company is more than the products that it makes. We are a care network, a company of people that really cares deeply about people and the planet. That's in our mission. And I think when you think about well-being and cultivating care in others is really, for me, such a positive indicator and at the heart of any mission in terms of a company's ability to thrive. And in the broader context of your question, I mean, the well-being of any workforce and its broader ecosystem is dependent on many factors, right? So when you think about trust and you think about belonging and communication and allowing people to stay engaged, to name a few, the data about stress around the globe, we are stressed out everywhere prior to COVID. So I think one of the things that I really noticed was the company and our leadership in terms of finding ways to just reduce the hidden stress that affects an organization. So when I think about that, listening, learning, and just creating the right forums and contexts and safe places for people to actually talk and communicate together. I mean, when I look at and you imagine, right, this all hit in January and it rolled through many countries, right? So if you think about China and then the presence in the US and the presence in Italy, Sweden, there were the many hot spots. And so our ability to talk to each other and learn from each other as that was happening, I think absolutely was something that was present. From a company perspective, I mean, I'm new to the company. I joined in January, but Barilla just reacted immediately to the emergency. And you could just see the decisions and the leadership really focusing first on the safety of its people. I experienced that on my own front from just simple things and people checking in on each other, support to the communities. I can provide you just a long list of ways that Barilla supported the communities. I mean, certainly keeping the food production continuous, right? And keeping that safe and being able to get food to people. So, from my perspective, that as an opportunity for the company to move into action was extraordinary, extraordinary. So if I were, to your question in terms of what we did, I mean, you think about, we're an agri-food sector, wheat, rye, tomatoes, basil, and, I just want to thank the incredible commitment of our people, and how Barilla really tried to continue to offer some normality to people around the world. But I would say the safety of Barilla people was absolutely the #1 priority. And you can see, and you probably know this personally, but all the workplaces were sanitized and underwent some extraordinary disinfection techniques. So you can imagine what that takes in terms of plants and facilities around the world. We were principled in that, right? So you have actions that were followed through the recommendations of the World Health Organization. And you had a crisis team that was paying attention to what was happening around the world. You can remember all of the confusion when this hit in terms of, what should we do? Should we wear masks? Should we not wear masks? Should we do this? Should we do that? And this company was just making decisions and taking risk out of it as quickly as they could, and working with people to make sure that from a plants and logistics perspective, there was protective equipment, there was masks, there was gloves, and even think about the front line working 24/7. From my understanding, not only were they just kind of brought in a circle of care, if you will, they received, I would say extra thanks in a variety of ways. One of my favorite was when the Barilla Group published thank you pages in national and local pages of all the people that were in our plants and frontline and supply chain, in order to just maintain that sense of connectiveness and morale. Right? Think about that. Like when you hear your name acknowledged, and when someone says, I care about you and I want to check in on you and make sure that you're okay. From a well-being perspective, at least from my sense of care, that has extraordinary impact, and would be one thing from a leadership perspective that I would call on each of you to do, because you just don't know what people are experiencing behind the Zoom call or the Teams call in terms of their personal life, which obviously we're all kind of managing work and family and in all these constraints, no matter where we are. It didn't stop at the plants. We went remote, right? And you can appreciate that just democratized, in my perspective, how we interacted as teams, as individuals. And at least what I noticed about the participation in my team and being part of a leadership team, we spent time checking in on each other. We took time making sure everyone was okay. We didn't just jump into the work necessarily, but there was a lot of care and opportunity to just ensure that we were sensitive to what was happening in the home. So imagine, right? You have young people who might be living alone. Some people were isolated. Some people had disruptive web services. Some people have young children at home, homeschooling, and feeling maybe sensitive to the fact that they can't work, straight through on a normal given day. And so as an example, even some of our leaders would have an office email that would say every day, well, this is how I'm going to work this week because I need to homeschool my kids. And so I'm going to be present for them at this time, and then I'll connect back in with you. And I think everyone relied on each other, and the work got done. And there was those moments where I'm sure we all felt a little extended and stretched. But one thing I knew for sure was that we were really working together and making sure that people were safe and cared for. I would just say finally, Renee, the support to the community has been just extraordinary. There's some humility about the company, as you can imagine, in terms of how they share what they do, which I so appreciate about who Barilla is. But their generosity and their focus on what our shareholder talks about is kind of the humankind in terms of product donations, for people in difficulty, as well as the first line in terms of healthcare staff, and the Red Cross and food banks and supportive solidarity kind of initiatives. There was donations of medical supplies. If you can remember early on, they were challenging to get. So when you think about masks and sanitizer and others needed supplies for donations to hospitals, there were charitable payments. There was, as of April, over 2 million euros that were just directly sent to support and strengthen some medical facilities in Parma. As you can imagine, part of the epicenter of kind of where this started. And financial support to research, because one thing that I hear loud and clear and see in action every day is the company cares about the future, and the future is everything to the company, and how we think about what we leave behind, and how we role model for what's needed in terms of people and the planet. So I'll pause there. There's a lot more to say, but I just feel really grateful for being part of such a human-centered well-being culture. And it's been a privilege to join that family and that team and people around the world.
So I'm appreciating, Dondeena, you starting with this idea of stress and how stressed the world has been all around the world, even before the pandemic. So the pandemic just created a pressure cooker, and we're still in it. So I don't want to speak about it like it's done, because
Right.
we are absolutely still in the middle of it and absolutely still having to figure things out. And we're needing to learn how to evolve new ways of relating to each other, new ways of caring for ourselves, new ways of running our organization. I'm wondering, for you all, what is something new that maybe you all have learned that you see from a well-being standpoint, well-being of your people, well-being of yourself, that you want to bring forward, that maybe it was something that was or wasn't happening before, but now it's become even more a priority? Anything come to mind in that area that can help us think about what we should be thinking about as employers?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my observations, having been, from my perspective, embedded in kind of wellness, if you will, over the last 5-8 years in terms of focusing on that, and then this distinction of well-being, right? I'll start with an observation of myself, and then I'll apply that to kind of what I saw in the company. But what I became aware of, I think there's just this narrowness of well-being in American culture in particular, in terms of diets and food and workouts and kind of checking the box on things, compared to this Italian concept of benessere, right? Like it's an amazing word which literally means to be well, right? Well-being, love, good food,
Benessere.
family, conversation, community, right? And so, this is in the deep values of Mediterranean culture. And we talk about the Mediterranean diet, which I think sometimes we forget the lifestyle part of this, slowing down, eating together, and, cooking as an example. When you think about just well-being, and people say the one thing that they can do to kind of bring kind of control back into your life, if you will, is preparing a meal and turning on the music and doing that with your loved ones and sitting around the table. And it sounds so strange, but it enabled me to kind of make this distinction between wellness and well-being. I think while wellness may be about feeling your best, and we kind of put that face on of I feel good, I think well-being, in contrast for me, is about increasing our innate capacity to thrive in whatever circumstance. And I can tell you there were days I didn't feel so good of, joining a new company, feeling a little bit like, now what do I do in this role, in this situation? And I think with well-being being about innate capacity, I became keenly aware that we were building capacity in real time. We were creating hope for each other. We were supporting each other. Our communications team put out this One Hug network, and it was a way for us to kind of share ideas and exchange kind of our own personal ways that we were approaching it. There were individuals in the company, you can imagine, who were yoga certified, and they were actually throwing out free sections for people to join them in stretching. We've had Mediterranean-inspired cook-alongs. As you can imagine, we have some of the best chefs, and our approach on gastronomy is extraordinary. Today is World Gastronomy Day, by the way. We had virtual coffees. We celebrated our colleagues. And I think all of these were kind of positive signs of really a strong, engaged, resilient workforce. And for me, it just allowed me to think about bringing that forward and calling it out. Sometimes the invisible is happening that we need to bring that is more visible, so people can understand that this is something really important. This is the fiber that's connecting us, and this is what's helping us be resilient and continue to kind of bring that care forward to people who need it. And so I think that's probably the thing that I was most aware of.
That's
And
great.
I'll share my personal piece later if there's time.
Joan, I want to ask you the same question, because I'm wondering, and again, we're not through with the pandemic, and we don't know if there's going to be an end, or if we're going to start to learn how to deal with this virus as a new part of our lives, and bring forth new ways of working and relating and all that. When it comes to well-being and the resilience of people, I'm wondering what you all have learned that you feel like, okay, this is something that maybe we knew before, but we now want to bring this forward in a more powerful way because we're seeing how important it is.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, if you see the glass half full on this, if there is anything to see, you'll see that on this, I would call it in this 100 days of pandemic, at least what we've lived through in Mexico, we have accelerated things that we've been talking for the last probably 2-3 years. I'll give you an example. For instance, the whole digital space. If you're facing a situation that you've never faced before, in other words, we've taken for granted that we've grown our business. In Mexico, we've been operating since over 90 years. And I mean, traditionally, the business is pretty much, I would say, the same. There are stores, you deliver the product, consumers go to the store and take it, and consume it at home or on the go or whatever that may be. Now, imagine a world that you are locked down at home. Well, we have never had this kind of what-if scenario. I mean, for 90 years, nobody has been at home. I mean, people go out and buy their things and play out and gather with families. But our business is done through intermediaries, in other words, through customers. So people go out and buy the product and take it and consume it. So we had to speed up the whole digital platform into what is our role then to deliver our products if people cannot really go to their corners shop. So we accelerated this 2-3 year out, we've been thinking about the whole digital revolution. What would be the role of our business in that digital? And we literally had to land, that concept of how do we then deliver at home, not through shops, and then how people, with pushing a little button in their own mobile phone, can order a Coke or whatever juice product that we have, or milk product, etc., and be delivered literally in 15 minutes. Can we do that? And we proved over this last day, again, 100 days that we've been in this kind of lockdown situation, that this is possible. So in other words, it really accelerated our thinking in an exponential fashion to bring to life ideas that we've been playing around, that now it is not scenario planning, it's reality. So that's one of the big positives. The other one, Renee, is the whole concept about working from home. Let me tell you my little bias here, and probably shows my age, but I've been growing in an organization that being close to each other, the physical contact of being in the office, that was the way of doing business. Not seeing somebody, probably there was a layer of, let's call it mistrust. In other words, if you don't see somebody, I mean, what is this somebody doing in terms of producing results? I tell you, we're celebrating, I call it the 100 days because that happened actually today. The whole mindset has shifted. It has nothing to do with having somebody physically next to your desk. You can do it remotely. And of course, it has all the pros and cons. I can tell you my personal experience, and we'll talk more about this, is that I'm putting in more hours than before. But the fact is that productivity has not definitely gone down at all. In fact, I would imagine that, I don't have any metrics on this, but people feel that, Jesus, they are more engaged, they are more focused. That obviously brings you another layer of being tired, and it kind of, there are other consequences of that intensity. However, we have proven, even if we've been toying with the idea for years about this home office thing and flexibility of timing on the hours that you put in, that actually it does work. So we are all surprised by this new reality of operating, not for a week, now for 3+ months, that we have not seen each other physically. But I tell you, I mean, we've been pushing along, we've been planning the same way, we've been actually strategizing, reviewing plans in a faster manner. And I think because of this new environment that is volatile and we had no playbook, we had to reinvent ourselves in a way that we could operate and obviously keep the business running. Of course, it brings other dimensions in terms of, again, that we were not foreseeing this. But all I'm saying is that this new reality has put us on a hot water, proving that something that was theoretically possible is now, in fact, very real. And it's not about just a percentage of the workforce, but maybe even the totality of some departments that have been operating remotely, many kilometers away from each other. But I tell you, the results are speaking up. And we need to recover some of the downside that we had at the very beginning of this pandemic. So lots of learnings, a lot of the unknown, a lot of experimenting, lots of sharing thoughts, ideas, feelings, lots of being far more connected probably than before. What Dondeena was saying, I mean, is so true. Connectivity that we have today is far greater than we were when we were physically in the office. Even on these coffee breaks that you may bump into each other, now it's on a click that you can connect, send a message, get an immediate response on things. The downside is that you're 24/7 connected. But again, I think we need to strike the right balance to ensure that that level of connectivity and possibility to reach out to each other also protects basically the space of personal time, and ensuring that there is discipline when it's say this is lunchtime, and that's the morning where we get started, and that's the evening where we need to stop. And by the way, there are weekends in between, because otherwise you may get into some sort of an inertia that since you're available anyhow because you're at home, then of course I can talk to you and reach out to you at any point in time. So that is all another part of that equilibrium, of that pendulum, of this new reality, that even though we're reachable 24/7, we need to ensure that we protect our spaces, because we need time to disconnect, to think, and obviously to be with our loved ones instead of just being 100% all the time with work.
Yeah. So I'm appreciating a couple of things you're saying, Joan. One is the level of pressure we've all been feeling as employers, and how the pressure itself has helped us take what might have been an idea and turn it into reality quickly, like your digital platform, your digital thing out to consumers quickly. And then the other is this whole issue, which I don't think any organization that I know of has quite figured out yet, which is if we were already pretty stressed and the pandemic has created even more pressure, and now we are working at home, it's how do we make sure we are prioritizing well-being of employees as companies, but also as ourselves, really taking responsibility ourselves for our own well-being. So there's just, it's going to be interesting to see how we sort that out. For you personally, and I'm aware of the time here, so I want to ask both of you guys, but I want to start with you, Joan. What have you noticed for yourself? How have your own habits, your own wellness habits perhaps, and your leadership shifted? What changes have you made given what you've been through in you say the last 100 days? Can you tell us one or two things that you say, wow, this is something that has been new for me or reinforced, and now I can see that this is going to be a part of my way of being?
Yes, at least a couple of things, important ones. One is the caring for each other. I think Dondeena said it very well, which is the personal issues that you're facing in your personal life when you stay at home, whether it's the homeschooling, the issues that you have, whether your grandparents with you, whether you have a small apartment, whether it's noisy out there. There are all kinds of issues that are playing around on your even personal well-being in terms of focusing and concentrating on what you do. Not creating a level of empathy, Renee, with those people in your team or whatever colleagues that you work with is definitely a big miss. In other words, if you assume that everybody feels the same way, that their environment, work environment, and family issues around that person are the same like yours, I mean, I think obviously I personally have raised a level of awareness that is far greater than before. Not only because I hear the dog barking in the background and I see the grandpa moving around and the daughter, wanted to get your attention, but I think you yourself, I guess digitally, you move into that person's space. I mean, not only looking to their background and where they live, but you get a bigger picture of that person as a whole rather than just as a colleague or somebody that works with you. Secondly, and I think that it's an important one. If you don't take care about yourself, it is very difficult to take care of others. I mean, I lead a large team of people. And I can feel personally whether I'm really drained, tired. It's a nonstop. It's from one meeting to the other, no time to disconnect and reconnect. So it's also about how you orchestrate or you plan your agenda. What are the few good rules, for instance, Renee, that we have established ourselves? So, for instance, no meeting before 9 a.m., no meeting after 5 p.m., 1 hour lunch. So let's establish this. And by the way, this week we have established a new rule, which is Wednesdays afternoon is time for no meetings, it's time to think and for planning. So let's take after lunch on Wednesday from, let's say, 1:30 until 5, with no connections, no meetings, nothing. So only for ourselves to really focus on what we need to do, plan, think, strategize. Otherwise, this dynamic that is going so fast, it's this on and off constantly, and I think your brain gets extremely tired in trying to reconnect on things that you're not even well prepared for the next meeting. So you need to slow down so we can speed up later on. So those are, I would say, the two kind of examples I can give you.
That's great. That's terrific. That's it. I like how practical they are because we can all use them ourselves. Dondeena, how about you? What have you noticed for yourself that has shifted or you're thinking about maybe in a new way that you are now bringing forward for your own well-being and your own leadership?
Yes, I mean, all of the things that Jean mentioned were front and center, but I would just say, as you shared, I had written a book called Living Full Circle, which was really ancient rituals and timeless rituals, accessible, affordable, and of all of those, my go-to is breath work. And, it helps me ground, it helps me stay present, but I really notice when I don't take the time to just inhale 4 seconds, exhale 6, rest for 2. And that just sounds so trite, if you will, but it's a powerful way to stay grounded. It's a powerful way to connect with the teams. And I would also say not necessarily so prescriptive on this is the time for this is the time for that, this is the time for this, but really allowing people to just be able to share where they are and say, I can't hold the space for this right now. I have this I need to put my attention to. And, small teams working in that context to just be really sensitive to all of that. And I would also say I've brought the science of well-being to my colleagues. I've integrated breathwork where I can, even if it's just a 2-minute reminder. And we're starting to experiment a little bit with it in our recipe builder that helps me. I've made pasta my carb of choice. I had no, just no understanding of how many pasta recipes there were. And we have these amazing chefs. So I've cooked more. I've actually learned how to make a good carbonara. And we've celebrated and shared pictures of how that works out. Sometimes not so good in my kitchen, but I've absolutely focused on making sure that people are fed and that we're taking time to take a break and play some music and just step back, so that we can stay present and not give in to the overwhelm, because this is really serious. And if you think about my role of translating dietary recommendations into what will inspire healthy lifestyle, this better than I. What's happening, it just sounds so crazy to say to someone, eat less, move more, do this. That general typical advice just doesn't even seem fair in this context. And so I think we've brought in a real focus on an individual and where they are, and finding ways to just support each other so that we can be more adaptable and more agile. Because to your point, we don't know what's next. It seems like every other week we're waking up to something that's different, that really presses on our ability to just stay present, just given the level of stress. And so I think it's just offering up a space for people to be adaptable and feel safe enough to share where they are, and us being able to respond as a community and surround that. So I just feel really grateful that I'm a part of that type of kind of mission-based oriented culture.
Yeah, what I am appreciating about what you're saying, Dondeena, Joan actually used the word, but I'm hearing it in the spirit of what you're saying too, and that is empathy, and the importance of empathy. And I would also go as far as to say is compassion, us having a great deal of compassion for what we are all dealing with and the stress we're all under, and the ability to reach out and be compassionate with each other. The other thing I want to reinforce with what you just said is the power of breath. I've always thought of, breath is the first thing we do. We take a breath, we inhale when we're born, we exhale when we pass. And in between, this is the one tool we have always at our disposal to make a state shift, to change our physiology, to change our state of emotions, to change our sense of well-being, and to come from a better place in our own lives. So I'm going to shift here because I'm noticing the time, and I want to ask John Toomey, my co-conspirator in this webinar, to pick a question from the group. John, are you with us?
Hi, Renee, I'm here. There's some really great questions, and the one that I'm going to pick first off is, we know there's lots of people who work in offices and a lot of those people working from home, but what about the plant workers who are basically turning up as normal to do their jobs? What sort of things have you put in place to care for them, both physically, mentally, to help them sort of stay in check moving through this?
Well, I can start. I mean, and obviously this is not my area of responsibility nor my expertise, but we had continued communication internally about how our plants were the #1 priority and the people there to kind of operate throughout the crisis. And you can appreciate that they were ruled as essential activity, right? So I know that workers at the Barilla plants were provided with personal protective equipment, with masks, with gloves. They introduced the measurement of temperature on entry, as well as the obligation to have social distancing, at least a meter apart. And this sounds really, just from a regiment perspective, easy. But we did see that they were able to shift, and all those activities were conducted with safety distance, and what might seem impossible for some, but they introduced shifts for the canteen, so not everyone was gathering at the same time. They spread out the seats, and people were incentivized for that as well, and felt cared for. And again, I think I mentioned earlier the thank you pages and just the acknowledgement of each person.
Yeah, John, from our side, is very much the same. The additional layer has been to sensitize those workers on their responsibility, not for their own health, but for the health of their families as well. So what we have instituted is also a medical care line to ensure that any family from those frontline workers, again, we call them heroes because of obviously what they do every day, actually were extremely well taken care of. Any symptomatics or anything that actually they had any questions about, that obviously they had a friendly line on the other side to actually, instill any instructions or any whatever answers to their questions that they may have.
Wonderful. There's lots of questions about moving forward and people coming back to work or staying working from home. And one of the threads that's coming through there is, what are you seeing in terms of changes in culture? And in relation to that, are you getting some idea of the culture that you want to create with this new mix of people working from home, working in an office?
Shall I go? Very quickly. The first thing is all this. That's an interesting discussion we have had internally, which is, when are we coming back? And the answer is, I don't think we're going back to the past reality. So the first thing is we need to actually plan for. It's not going to happen next week. That's going to be a matter of months before. And again, we're talking about the reality in Mexico, right? When unfortunately the pandemic is still not on its peak. So we're planning that it's going to be months before actually we can think about going back to the office. Now, on the other hand, John, I can tell you that clearly the reality is not going to be, as I mentioned before, like 100% of the workforce going into the office. But I think we're now talking that maybe 30–40% of the people can operate actually from home. And that obviously will create a new dynamics on the way we need to operate, yet to be seen. A couple of things that we have experienced in this digital kind of way of working. I can tell you, it's funny, I say this, I am from Spain myself, but one thing is being on time on the calls. It's funny. I can tell you by experience that usually a meeting in Mexico may be running on a plus 10–15 minutes before we get everybody in the room. Secondly, is not talking on top of each other. I mean, the digital environment allows us for, somebody talks, everybody listens, and then somebody else talks and everybody else listens as well. So I think I can tell you tangibly, those are the kind of two big things or quick things that I have experienced in seeing a shift over the last few days.
Dondeena, how about you?
I think it's very similar. I think culturally, the way of working will continue to evolve in terms of what's needed. I mean, we talked about stress earlier, and in some ways, being able to stay home and kind of manage through what you need to have done for work and what's happening in your personal life, you have kind of more time to step back and organize that, right? We're not rushing to the airport. We're not waiting there. We're not dealing with all of the issues of public transportation and things that, as you can appreciate, it kind of prior, it's like we needed to be there, right? We needed FaceTime, if you will. And I think to the point, there's just been this evolution, if you will, of how we connect, and the unwritten kind of rules of being on a Zoom call together has just evolved. And I do think it will change the culture moving forward. I do think there'll be some things that we won't go back for. We are asking the question, do we really need to be there? Is that essential to be there? Can this work? And for me, I think that's one more positive thing of how we're dealing with stress, because as you know, time and not having enough time is stressful. So time management's been, I think, a really interesting one.
So
Do you have time for one more?
we don't, John. We've only got about 3 more minutes. Sorry about that. So if you all did have questions, know that we've got a list of them, and we will absolutely, we're going to try to get back to you on them. I'm wondering, Joan and Dondeena, if there is one takeaway that you would love this group of people who have been kind of listening in to this conversation to take from this call. It can be an insight you've gotten. It could be a resource that you feel is helpful. Whatever you feel would be most valuable to supporting this group of people in really thinking about well-being at work as we move forward, what would that be?
Go ahead, Dondeena.
I'll just keep it simple. Do pay attention to your breath and how you show up. And also appreciate what that might be like for other people. And that personal connection and your instinct of modeling that care, I think just opens up the opportunity to extend that. Not everyone might be comfortable to suggest, hey, I think we all need to take a step back and take a breath. I can sense the stress. Let's just take a moment. And I think as leaders in this space with a focus on well-being, it's essential that we're acutely aware that that may be needed and that might be a suggestion, and it's an important one. And so my takeaway is I'm being more bold about where I see that and where to insert that, and to call and check up on somebody that maybe I saw something a little bit different where they might need a little bit of extra support. So take care of yourself so you can take care of others, and let's be, do, say in every way that we can around that.
Awesome, thank you. And Joan?
Very much along the same lines, and I think as people leaders, I think now is time to lead by example. So in that sense, ensure that what we preach, we do, and be coherent. Also, again, I think it's about embracing change. We've said it all along, but now change really seems to be very tangible. Secondly, or thirdly, I would say be resilient and patient. I mean, things are going to happen. I'm not going to happen overnight. So just, breathe and keep the course, but, things eventually will happen. And lastly, it's important to ensure that you bring along everybody. In other words, no one left behind as a mantra, because it's about ensuring that the race, continues, but with everybody together and understanding, as you were saying, with empathy and compassionately, to ensure that, we understand everybody. Everybody basically goes with the speed of change differently. Is ensuring that we have the right empathy to bring along everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you both for just being willing to do this and share your thoughts, your stories, your experiences, and being vulnerable with that and really letting us know. I also want to thank the Global Wellness Institute, who has been incredibly supportive of getting this webinar series out in the world. We're just so grateful. And I'm wondering if Susie and Nancy are the head dogs of the Global Wellness Institute. They lead us all, and I'm wondering if they want to say any final words.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Renee, for organizing this. I have loved listening to Dondeena and Juan, and I've been taking notes, as I always do, and I'm anxious to learn a little bit more about this checking in with each other, which I've heard, because I love that idea, and I just wonder how you can do that to make sure everyone is getting checked in on. So I'll have to give that some thought, and maybe Dondeena, I'll connect with you for some details on that. Thank you, Renee and John, for organizing this, and I look forward to the next one, which I think Beatrice has the date on it, and so that will be part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nancy.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Please, you do.
I just want to echo what Susie said and just thank you, Renee and John, for leading this for so long and for putting together these seminars at a time when people are really thinking a lot about the nature of work and how that has changed. And I am very happy to know that Dondeena has mastered carbonara because she lives down the street.
That's great. That's great. And our next session is on July 17th. We're going to focus on diversity, inclusion, and gender. And I know it's going to be a fantastic call. Mem Stumpf and Joel Hirschfeld on our initiative team are going to be leading that. And they've invited some incredible companies to it. So I hope you guys can join us for that. Thank you, everybody, for just being part of this. If this works, this will all work. We create a healthier world through all of us. So I'm really appreciative for all of you. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Take care, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.